All right. Well, thank you for inviting me today. My name, as you know, is Lisa Sorg. I've lived in Durham since 2006, 19 years. I can't believe it. I used to work at the Indy, for those of you who remember that publication, still around after all these years. And then I went and worked at NC Policy Watch as their environmental reporter. I'm originally from Indiana, very rural Indiana, like so rural, it makes Goldston look like Paris. That's rural. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of the most pressing issues facing us in the environment today. I'm also going to share some stories of hope. We need those, right? So, and I guess I will be taking questions at the end. And if you have any comments or anything, I'm happy to hear them. So this right here is a photo of, it's called the STAR facility. It's near Goldsboro. And the reason this was part of a series I did called Gaslighting, which was about the natural gas build out in North Carolina, which I'll get to in a second. But this facility takes coal ash and it reburns it and turns it into concrete or cement filler. And this is in a Black neighborhood, of course. And so there are a lot of people who are obviously still concerned about the pollution coming out of this particular facility. And this is an area that also has groundwater issues from the coal ash pits that leaked for many, many years. So we're going to start with this massive natural gas expansion that's happening in North Carolina. In fact, I've been at many meetings lately about this. So it's all interconnected, but in a way it's also fragmented. So what we have are 4 natural gas plants that are proposed by Duke Energy. 2 of them in Person County near Roxborough, 2 of them at Marshall, which is down near Mooresville on Lake Norman. And so those are going to be, putting millions of tons of methane in the air. As you know, methane is even more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. It's shorter lived in the environment, but while it's there, it does more damage. Oh, certainly. Wait, is that this right here? Is that better? No. Presentation mode. Standard dynamic presentation mode. View. Slide only, navigator, inspector, object, show. Enter full screen. That?
Top left where it says view.
Maybe
check that.
Slide only.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. Okay. So 4 natural gas plants, big ones coming. We have, and I'll show you this Mariah Energy Center right here. That is also in Person County. Person County is in the crosshairs, one of the counties in the crosshairs. This is basically a liquefied natural gas storage facility. And to let you know, it's 50 million gallons of liquefied natural gas. It's gigantic. I'll show you the footprint in a second. But it's in farmland. It's a beautiful part of the county. And what's happened is as Enbridge, which used to be Dominion, has cleared the land to build this ginormous project, there has been dirt and silt go into the creek, which has endangered mussels in it. And because of some very bizarre state laws, there's nothing anybody can do about that, allegedly. And then, so we have 4 gas plants, 50 million gallons of liquefied natural gas, and then we have multiple pipelines, which I'll get to, MVP Southgate, T15, and the Williams Transco pipeline. Let's see. Oops. Let's go back one. Come back. Ooh, there. So I did this story. These folks are great. They're just great old hippies. I love them. And they have a bee farm in Davidson County. This is some of their hives in the back. And the Transco pipeline starts at the Gulf of Mexico and goes through North Carolina toward New Jersey is going to go right through their farm. And so they're going to have to move their hives, which is not as easy as it sounds, because bees are persnickety. And they need, they need to have a windbreak. Anyway, it's incredibly sad what's happened. This is they live on an old farm that's been in the family for generations. So this is the Transco pipeline. They are expanding it. There are already like 3 in a row. Like there's 3 pipelines, and now they want to add a 4th. So the concern is for this pipeline and all of them is there's something called, euphemistically, the area of high concern, also known as the blast zone, also known as the incineration zone. So depending on the pressure of the pipeline and the diameter, that will tell you how close you will be. And then, and so that's the Mariah Energy Center. So anyway, the blast zone I'll get to in a second, but this is, now they've since built this. This was taken, I guess, last summer, but this is this was farmland. This was forest. And now that's what it looked like as of last year. And that's where the 50 million gallons of natural gas is going to be stored. And the reason they say they need this is in case there's a cold snap and there isn't enough gas. This is the T15. This is what they call an intrastate pipeline. The Transco goes among states. This one is within North Carolina, and I'll get to why that's a problem. So you can see it starts near Hyco Lake, near the Duke Energy power plants. Then it goes through Caswell County, near some game lands. It also down here by Leesburg Road, it passes by Woodland Elementary School. And when I say passes by, I'm talking about from here maybe to the back of the building. Woodland Elementary School is in the blast zone. These are kids like K through 5. And if you've ever been up by Hyco Lake, it's not like it's a straight shot anywhere. It's very circuitous because you have to go around the lake, and to get, you have, the blast zone also is something that will tell you how much time you have to get out. How would you like to get 200 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds out of the way if there was a leak? Not really. So it goes all the way to Rockingham County, and you can see it's right near the Dan River. We'll get to Rockingham County in a second, but Rockingham County and Person are the counties that are in the greatest way of the natural gas build out. And these compressor stations, they put millions of gallons or millions of tons of methane in the air. It's really incredible. So they're investing in this infrastructure instead of renewables. Now, I understand that, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. We do have battery storage, but it's also, we have, the Trump administration is very into natural gas now. So there's a lot of support for this sort of major build out. Also, and I'll get to this in a second, but there's some proposed rollbacks of the Clean Air Act that will make these even more popular. And then we have yet another pipeline. Pipelines are us. This is MVP Southgate. It just goes, compared to the others, it just goes into Eden, but they're going to have to drill under the Dan River to install this pipeline. A lot of these pipelines are, you'll see, if you ever see the HDD, that means horizontal drilling. And so they drill under the river instead of going over the river or through the river, which is good, but you still got to drill under the river. And if you look at a map and you'll see that a lot of these are in communities of color or low income communities, and that's not an accident. One of the things that people say they need the gas for is to generate electricity, and the justification for that is data centers. Do people know what data centers are? Yeah. They're enormous. They're everywhere. They are huge energy sucks. They love energy. They are voracious. They also use a lot of water because those buildings need cool. This is a picture of in Virginia, actually, and these are Amazon data centers right next to these houses. And there's folks out in Cherokee County, out in the West, that live near one of these data centers, and they cannot hear the birds sitting on their porch. Like unbelievable sound, just and a din 24/7 of the fans and the cooling systems. So in addition, basically taking up all the good air is what we would say in Indiana, they are a nuisance. And there are moratoria in the West because a lot of these data centers are going to the West, but Person County is going to have one by Microsoft. Hildebrand, which I'd not ever heard of until recently in Burke County. There's a big data center that wants to go there. And it's interesting because some of these data centers, as I have found, have cut deals with local governments that they don't have to tell anybody what their energy or water usage is. There's a non-disclose agreement. And so if your, energy bill goes up because of this, the stress on the system or, whatever the economics are, you have no way of knowing if the energy is being sucked up by the data center or how much. And I have copies of these non-disclosures, and they say, well, every company has some things we don't like to say. Well, yeah, but this is a public utility we're talking about here. These are public goods, the electricity and the water. The water especially is also a problem, especially if we're in a drought, which we're not now. But so data centers, in addition to this, there was a bill, and I need to see what the status of this is. It's under, I think it might be repealed, but there was a bill that was in December of 2024. It was disaster relief bill. It was a North Carolina bill, and it was to help the West after Helene. Well, what usually happens is legislators love to pack these bills with little projects that could not stand on their own because they are so horrible. But, it's hard to say no to helping the West, so they plop it in there. It was something called wonkily down zoning, which basically what it does is it makes sure that local governments can't make certain zoning decisions that should be theirs. And one of the way this affected a data center in Hildebrand is the town does not want, this is a small town. It's like Chapel, not even as big as Chapel Hill. They don't want this data center, but they can't zone the land to prevent it because of this piece of state legislation. And, I was at a meeting, and there are people that are going to be living this close, right on top of it, and, are not going to be able to hear their birds, and they are not going to be able to even, some people have reported that they can be in their house with the windows closed and they still hear it. Drinking water and PFAS. Do people know what PFAS is? It's what's for breakfast. This is the Hall River, which unfortunately is, downstream of a lot of bad actors, industries that put it into the water. And there is a success story I'll share about PFAS, and then I'll tell you how that's imperiled right now. But the great thing was when it was in 2017, it was 8 years ago this month, that we found out there was PFAS in the Cape Fear River. And it was because there was a scientific paper, and the Star News of Wilmington reported on it, and the rest is history. So there was several groups down in the lower Cape Fear, Clean Cape Fear and Cape Fear River Watch and Stop Gen X in Our Water, that literally for 7 years fought to get drinking water standards for PFAS. And they did last year at the EPA level. Not for all PFAS, there are 15,000 of them, but for the big ones. So that was great news. That's a success story. It took 7 years of lobbying, of going to meetings, of, Michael Regan, who was our DEQ secretary, then went to the EPA, which helped. Lawsuits. I mean, these folks worked night and day, and they got it. And it was a beautiful day. It happened last April of 2014 or 24 time. what time is a construct? The bad news is the EPA wants to roll those back. But before we get all excited, there's a rulemaking process. So when, there's always these headlines, oh, the EPA wants to roll all this stuff back. That's a process. I mean, I'd say trust the process, but maybe we can't anymore. But they just can't roll them back one day. They just can't wave their magic wand and these go away. They might be starting to, but these are still in effect. So PFAS, I also want to, before I get to megasites, I want to talk about some other sources of PFAS that you may not be aware of. And that is, let's see, this was it. I have my slides out of order. So in 2021, I think it was, there was this huge fire in Winston-Salem. This is a drone photo from the fire department. It was on the north side. You can see downtown to the south. This was a fertilizer fire. It had 600 tons of ammonium nitrate sitting there. The fire department was terrified. It was going to be the largest explosion of this material in U.S. history. There was a port in Syria, actually, that had less than this that exploded with it, and it like wiped out miles. So there was an evacuation. This thing burned for a week. It was crazy. There were other millions and more tons of other chemicals on site. It is a true miracle it didn't explode. So what happened was, they had to put this out with water. And the fire department, and the people who owned this, it was the Winston Weaver fertilizer plant, trapped the water because they didn't want it going in the creek because it was full of fertilizer, and that's going to kill the fish. It's going to be a complete disaster. So they got all this water, they put it in tanks, and they put it on a farm. So at the time, there were no, and there still is no law against having PFAS in your wastewater. So they knew, meaning the EPA and DEQ and the fertilizer company and the farmer, it's a dairy farm, knew that there was high levels of PFAS in this firewater. And it was applied on the farmland for the cows to eat. And fun fact, they've never tested the milk. They never tested the groundwater. They never tested the drinking water wells. They never tested the surface water that's running by the farm. We don't know what's going on at Shady Grove Dairy Farm. But this farm had a history of non-compliance with some other things. I got this story as a tip, and the Yadkin Riverkeeper now is trying to test at least the drinking water at the nearby homes and the surface water. But this dairy farm, we don't know if the cows ate the grass that had the PFAS and then passed it on to the milk or not. So I want to go back to megasites briefly. And this is, a lot of times this kind of goes back into the data centers. This is a megasite, I want to say in Brunswick County. It's going to be a megasite. It's going to be paved over. And megasites in the state law are characterized, they have to be about 1,000 contiguous acres, and they have to be owned by a single property owner to get a certain... Well, the legislation then gives you guidance on how to zone these. But interestingly, the legislation requires the local governments to zone it first, industrial, and then see if there are any wetlands on the property or anything else that might be environmentally sensitive. So they zone it first. Makes no sense, right? Backwards. Like you'd want to know where the wetlands and the seeps and the endangered species and critters are, and then maybe you could decide whether to zone it industrial. No, the law tells local governments to zone it first and then go in and see what's going to happen. So there is a situation in Pitt County near Greenville right now where this is happening, and this mega site, 1,000 acres, is full of wetlands. And so there's going to be a meeting this week at the Planning Commission where people are going to come out and beg them not to approve the rezoning. The other thing is, you know, because if you're here, you're probably civically engaged. Once you zone something industrial, you could put just about anything there, even if it never became a mega site. Once that industrial is in place, you might as well just, you know, pour the chemicals right into the groundwater. This is a picture of Helene. I went to Swananoa. This, I think, was earlier this year. Yeah, I think it was in like February. There's no leaves on the trees. Swananoa. Has anybody been out there since Helene? It's whoa. Whoa. I mean, you can't even believe the force of the water. There are gigantic rocks and cars and trees still in the rivers, and people living in campers here in Swananoa. So this is going to be a decades-long cleanup. I think the important thing to know is this was supposed to be where it was going to be safe. This is, you know, you go to the mountains to get away from climate change. You think, well, we're not going to have a hurricane and it's going to be cooler, and none of that held true. One of the things that's going to complicate this is, as you know, because of the instability of mountainsides, you also have landslide zones. And so how they're going to build back is unclear, because a lot of this is now, you know, they'd have to get extra insurance. Are you going to be allowed to build back in the floodplain? Are you going to, you know, it's an incredibly complicated situation. And there's been so much disinformation. I still follow it online. There's this guy on Twitter who I will not platform by saying his name, but he puts out all kinds of lies all the time. And now that the Trump administration wants to kill FEMA, big problem. In fact, I was listening to a FEMA Review Advisory Council meeting, and it was live streamed a few weeks ago, and I could not believe what I was hearing. I could not believe it. One guy, I think he was, his name's Michael Watley. He used to be the head of the Republican Party and the state party. Now he's the RNC, like national level. And he was talking about, well, we know that FEMA, for those of you tuned in, this is not true. Just so you know, I don't want to take it out of context. You know, all the illegals got housing before the other people. That, okay, I'm offended by the term illegal, but that's not true. That's not remotely true. That's not even in the universe of truth. You're ethical humanists. It does not meet the mission of the ethical humanists to say that. And, you know, all kinds of just complete falsehoods spoken right there as if it were, and nobody challenged it, because they're all in it. You know, they're all talking about how FEMA is going to be abolished. And I mean, I will say that FEMA can be a bureaucratic nightmare. I have, you know, anybody will tell you that. But to destroy it is not the way, because they have nothing to replace it with, really, except their own paranoid, you know, fantasies, apparently. And I'll get to another program that I'm writing a story now that's really important. It's called the FEMA BRIC program. And it basically helps, you know, towns like Chapel Hill or wherever, you know, build resiliency before the storms hit. So you don't have to rebuild again and again. Dead. There's a little town called Pollocksville. Has anybody ever been to Pollocksville? It's adorable. It's sad, but adorable. 300 people, has had the same mayor for 42 and a half years. And they flooded, had 20 feet of water. They're on the Trent River, had 20 feet of water downtown in Florence. And so they got like $1 million from FEMA to elevate some buildings downtown. They're all excited. They're ready to sign the contract on April the 8th to have the work start, and FEMA killed the BRIC program on the 5th. And now they cannot elevate their buildings. Yeah. So this is where we're at. This is the average spring temperature. We're up 4 degrees from 1970. Those of us, I'm from the north. I remember when there was snow. I even remember when there was snow in Durham. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Like, now, if I see snow, I think, wow, it's amazing. And when I always see these hardware stores that sell sleds, and I'm like, y'all, you really should not be selling. Those sleds are going to sit there forever. So what's happening now? It's all bad. Some of this we've already gotten into, but National Institutes of Health is going to stop research on climate change and health. Those of you who know that climate change, extreme heat, if you were out at No Kings, you know what heat feels like. Also, people working outside, the roofers, there's a reason they start at 6 a.m. I can't blame them. EPA plans to halt PFAS research in food, which is really important because in parts of the state, especially down by Comores, which is the big problem in North Carolina, that has the Gen X has come out of the smokestacks down onto the ground, polluted the groundwater, but also polluted honey and crops. It's also been found in house dust. PFAS has been found in house dust, mostly because of our furniture and our carpet. And I had a scientist tell me, you should keep your house as free of dust as possible. And I'm like, yeah, I am so dead. That ain't happening. But yeah, PFAS is probably in your house dust too, because of the carpet and the couches. So you can get your blood tested for PFAS. There's if you want to know, I think it's called Empower something. I had mine tested. Despite my bad housekeeping, I don't have tons of PFAS in my blood, but some people do. And there is actually clinical guidance on that now to take to your healthcare provider for additional monitoring and surveillance, because PFAS, high levels in your blood can be linked to testicular, kidney, liver cancers and problems, depressed immune response, low birth weight, reproductive problems. I've even seen some early studies that say that exposure to PFAS can increase the breast density in women, which is important because that is a risk factor for breast cancer. So it's all bad. We're going to start drilling. Great. It's pretty awesome. And then this just came out last week, the rollback of air pollution from power plants, such as Duke's. So that's not happened, but it's in progress. And North Carolina, because apparently we are inspired by the federal government, the state budget is cutting the Environmental Justice Office, which is really important because that was an office that is a liaison to the Black, brown, and low-income communities, to give them a voice in something. I mean, that doesn't necessarily, stop the permit, but it's something. It's more than we had. Duke Energy, as you may have known, they had a legal mandate, that they were supposed to cut their carbon emissions by 70% by 2030. Not happening. It looks like it's going to pass. They are going to be allowed to forego those interim reductions, and they just have to have net zero by 2050, which is like, I think I said this at the last meeting I was speaking to. Let's say I wanted to lose 30 pounds by December, and I'm not going to stop eating. I'm not going to go on a diet, and even though I want to lose 30 pounds by December. But on November 30th, I'm going to cut off my leg, and that way I'll have lost 30 pounds. I mean, it's like, how do you just put the brakes on? Like, on the eve of 2050, you're just going to say, we're going to shut all the carbon down? No, that's crazy. There are benchmarks for a reason. So anyway, they're going to get to kick the can down the road, and we're going to marinate in our own juices. There's also a bill to streamline water quality permitting. That's important because all these pipeline and mega site And industry, they have to have a water quality permit if they cross a stream or a wetland or whatever. And by streamlining these water quality permitting, it basically puts them on the fast track. DEQ has 5 days in some cases. 5 days. It takes 5 days to read the permit. Incredible. And in some cases, you can rebuild in the floodplain because that's not a bad idea. I want to give you, oh, these are the cicadas. Remember last year, the cicadas? This is another source of joy for me. I love those things. I have a bowl of cicada husks that I should actually, have a contest. How many husks are in this gigantic bowl? I do want to give you a couple other, besides the PFAS happy story, which is still happy. There were 2 other things, and if you decide to become active in environmental issues, I think the most important takeaway is that you do it on the local level. Like Chapel Hill, remember the toxic coal ash mound over on Martin Luther King? Y'all didn't get everything you wanted, but it's not going to have houses on there, and that's because people in Chapel Hill fought. Because if you would have put houses on that coal ash pile, that would have been a tragedy, and it was going to be, ding, ding, affordable housing. So there are 2 examples I want to give you of how people got in front of the issue on a local level, because once it gets to the state, they're just like, it's our job to pass these permits, to grant them. We might strengthen them a little, tweak them, but they're basically in the position and in the mandate to allow people to build polluting sources. So in Yadkinville, or maybe it was Hamptonville, it was in Yadkin County, this guy wanted to come in from Wisconsin and he wanted to build a mine, big old granite mine, 500 feet from a school. Blasting at all hours of the day, again, farmland. And I'm telling you, these people, I would not mess with Hamptonville. They got organized. I just couldn't believe it. They were on their planning and zoning people, board of adjustment, school board. I mean, they were on those elected folks, like had them on speed dial for a year, and they fought it back. And that guy from Wisconsin had to take his mine and go elsewhere. But it was a really, really hard fight, but they did it. And they did it at the most basic level. And I think it went before the Board of Adjustment, which nobody goes to the Board of Adjustment meetings unless you have business before them. But you'd be amazed at some of the things that happen there. You're like, whoa. So those really picayune boards that you think, who cares? They're doing stuff that you need to know about. And then the other similar was also it was a landfill, although it was called a stump dump is what they call them, in Vance County. And this guy wanted to come in and basically put construction debris at the headwaters of the Tar River. What could possibly go wrong? And again, the community came out, and this guy who wanted to do it had a really tough lawyer. His name's Tom Terrell. And I have to say, sometimes he's on the right side. I've seen him fight for solar ordinances, but I've seen him also on the wrong side. And they fought it back. That dump never happened. And it was so funny because at one point, Tom Terrell was trying to these are good old boys in Vance County. These are like farmers. They just crawled out from under their John Deere, and they're here at the Board of Adjustment hearing. And he's trying to tell this farmer how corn farming works or some kind of agriculture. And the guy's like, I'm a farmer. And here's Tom, and he's like in his suit, very ritzy suit. And I'm like, dude, man, you're not going to tell these people how to farm. They're farmers. So anyway, I know I've kind of rambled. I think it's the heat, but long way of saying times are tough, and the environment is in trouble. But I encourage you to pay attention and to get in front of these issues if they're in your town, if it's in Pittsburgh or Raleigh or wherever. That's the only way to do it. And, the great thing is that when you do it on a local level, your planning board people, your city council people, they have to see you in Food Lion. You know, the people at the state aren't going to see you in Food Lion, but, you know, or Whole Foods or wherever. So that's the great thing about having those local people accountable is that they're going to run into you on the street and they're going to be like, oh my God, there they are. I have to vote the right way or I'll never be, they'll stalk me the rest of my life. So, yes. So hold your local folks accountable, get the right people in there that are going to protect the environment and give, you know, this planet a chance.
Mm. Mm.
Are there questions, I guess? Yes. Oh, we're taking a quick break.
Sorry. Okay, so this is where we pass the basket. I only have one basket today. I don't know where the other one is. And the reason we pass the basket is because our society is an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from any other organization, and we give money to the AEU. So there you go. We survive due to your commitment to our common goals. So we pass the basket and thank you in advance for your donations. I want to remind everybody of the ground rules for the Q&A. Please raise your hand and there's going to be a microphone runner and they will, thank you, Robert, our newest member is going to run the microphone for us. Raise your hand, wait for the microphone. Please ask only one question at a time. And then we want everybody to have a chance to ask a question before we go back to anybody with second questions. So that is the way it goes. And Lisa, back to you.
Thank you. Okay.
I have a question regarding PFAS. Since you deal with PFAS,
Oh, wait, he was first in the blue and then can we do you? Yeah, I had, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, I was in a meeting in Roxborough a few days ago. Oh, am I not speaking?
Yeah, no,
correctly?
that's fine.
Here, with a hearing on a T15 pipeline.
Yes.
The DEQ. It seems that the DEQ doesn't do anything, but I would assume that its members have been appointed by Governor Cooper, or most of them.
Okay.
So why doesn't it do anything? Why does it just permit all these things? to
Okay,
happen?
I can tell you. Okay, and then go back. So DEQ, the secretary is appointed by the governor, but the rank and file is hired by anybody else. But they are limited in statute about what they can and can't do. They're also understaffed, underfunded, and people will sue them. And so that's why they have to find a legal reason to deny a permit, and that does not happen very often. So the rank and file at DEQ is I have to say, I know a lot of them and they're good people. They're great scientists, but they are limited by, I mean, the legislature will take it out on them. They will, there is a certain vindictiveness that will happen if, you know, if they start throwing the wrench in the machinery. That's why we have now law, you know, pending bill about fast tracking the water quality permitting. It's because DEQ took its time and did the science, and the legislature didn't like that.
since you spoke about PFAS, you must be aware of the ECA proposals in EU. Have you looked into it?
Oh, you mean the EU and the EU has much stronger regs.
No, the ECA proposals, they have not gone into force, but there is a proposal to ban all PFAS in Europe.
Right, right. That's not going to happen here.
Actually, EPA had a program to phase out PFAS.
They have.
The medical PFAS were exempt, but the others were supposed to be.
Well, the EPA has not regulated PFAS as a class. There are 15,000 types. And so there are only 6 that are regulated of 15,000. So, and the 2 that have been phased out are still in the environment because they don't go away. They're going to be here for centuries. So even though those 2 are gone, in terms of they're no longer allowed to be in production, they're still out there. So another question?
Yeah, more comment than a question. I remember when you did the reporting and editing for the Independent, and I really liked your work.
Thank
And it
you.
was a real loss to me and the Independent in terms of the quality, and they've never recovered from that. They're doing all right, but you were a real loss. So I'm glad I have another resource to follow your work.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and it's just tough time for newspapers all around.
You mentioned wetlands a couple of times, and I know that they've changed the definition
Mhm.
so that it only applies to land that feeds a stream or
Yes.
by some navigable, not navigable, but flowing water. Have you seen any degradation of land that used to be called wetland?
Well, that's a really great question. In fact, there's a meeting the state is holding later this month, a public comment about the wetlands rules. So wetlands, due to a Supreme Court case, there are, if you don't have what's called a hydrological connection, usually something they think it's going to be land-based, then the wetland is isolated and it's not got protection, but that does not account for the groundwater connections. So, this law is so terrible because it reduces to hydrology to what we can see, and hydrology is, a lot more than that, more than we can even contemplate. So the other thing is we don't have a really good inventory of wetlands in North Carolina because some of them are on private land. But I can tell you that, for example, this mega site that could be built in Pitt County, those wetlands are going to get filled if they don't meet, that very strict criteria. And the other thing about wetlands, they're near and dear to my heart. They're basically swamps, but I think swamps are cool. There's a new paper out by the Wildlife Resources Commission, and it has a whole section about wetlands and how important they are, especially in the mountains. And they have very rare species that live in them. And they do flood control. They host all sorts of, critters. And so they're incredibly important. To answer your question, we don't know, although maybe the state will tell us. At the time, they were trying to do a wetlands inventory so we can see what we have lost. I don't think that inventory is done yet. There is a Carolina Wetlands Association, though, that might have more information.
Hi, I was surprised to, when I looked into it a bit, to find out how many different products PFAS compounds are in. Everything from dental floss to lipstick to eye makeup to raincoats to, nonstick pans, all kinds of things. So this stuff is out there in the environment. My question is, do you know of, or are you aware of much research or ways to break down these compounds? I know that there are some microorganisms and fungi they've identified that can break down PFAS. Do you know, have you got any, I like solutions.
Yes,
Right?
I do too.
How can we find a solution?
Well, there's a lot of people working on that right now. There's a company that I think was started by Duke University called 374, which means that I think that's the Celsius or the centigrade to what makes PFAS, since we're into science, so hard to get rid of is that they have a fluorine carbon bond that is like unbreakable. So you have to heat it to try to break that bond. And so that's what people are trying to do now is find technologies that will break the bond of the fluorine and the carbon so that they can be destroyed. Right now, the issue is, let's say you have a whole house filter to get rid of the PFAS in your drinking water. Well, those membranes have to be disposed of. So they're often shipped to either Buffalo or Columbus, Ohio, where they're incinerated. Now, then you have to control for the emissions. So this is how the circular issues of PFAS happens. is that that's why they never go away. Or let's say there's PFAS in the wastewater at your sewage plant, which I'm sure there is. And then that wastewater treatment plant discharges into the river, which is the drinking water. And then it comes into the drinking water. And then it's the circular, it's a vicious cycle. To answer your question, there are a lot of companies working on it. They're thinking of, how to superheat it. But, everybody seems to have the magic bullet, but I've not seen it be scaled yet, because the scale is going to be what's important. It's going to be huge, the need.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So regarding this mega sites that you're saying, are there any laws against deforestation?
Are there any laws against deforestation? No, not really. Let me think. I'm trying to think if there's a law against deforestation. If it's private land, you can do whatever you want with your land. My parents live in a 19-acre woods where I grew up. It's beautiful. Has a problem with emerald ash borers, but other than that, it's beautiful. If they wanted to, they could turn it into a Walmart. Now, there might be, certain best practices or whatever, but no, there is no law that says if you own your land and you want to mow it down, you can mow it down. I do not recommend, but don't want to step on your toes.
Yeah, we live in Pittsburgh, so I wondered if you could tell me what is the update on our water? Because we got all relieved, with that big plant, and now I'm confused.
Yes, well, good news and bad news, as usual. The good news is that filtration system they put in is going to get your PFAS down. It should get it down to below the drinking water standard. That's good. So the bad news is there's another toxic compound that's coming down from Greensboro and Reedsville. It's called 1,4-dioxane. Delicious. It's used in industry. It's a carcinogen, likely carcinogen, and there are no standards for that right now. The other thing is there was just a lawsuit. I won't get into the sniping, but basically Greensboro, Ashboro, and maybe one other municipality sued the state saying, we don't have to take this stuff out of the water. It's not regulated. Don't make us do it. You can't make us do it. Try. So now there's a counter lawsuit, but 1,4-dioxane is a big one. And it's highly overlooked because it's kind of in the shadow of PFAS, but it's just as, in my opinion, it's almost as bad. And so, yes, you do have a 1,4-dioxane issue. Now, the town of Pittsburgh should have that information on their website. They've been pretty good about transparency, like this is what's happening. But sometimes there'll be this big bolus of 1,4-dioxane that somebody upstream puts into the deep river of the Haw, and here it comes. And then they have to shut down the intake. This is an incredibly expensive situation. And the people who pay for this are the ratepayers. There is a bill in the legislature right now called the Polluter Pays. It's really restricted to PFAS, but it would make people who people do, but companies that manufacture PFAS responsible to clean it up, to pay for like public utilities that have to put these expensive treatment systems. I think Wilmington has spent $80 million to get PFAS out of the water. And all of that fell on the ratepayer, which is not fair. You shouldn't have to pay for that. You didn't do it.
About the gas pipelines, if the power companies are not allowed to build the gas power plants, won't they just keep the coal power plants or even build more of them?
Right. And that's kind of the rub. And it's interesting because now Duke is on a schedule to retire their coal plants. There are folks in Person County, and I'm just saying this is one opinion, that say, with the controls on the now, of course, this could be rolled back, but right now the controls on the coal plants are such that there's not as much pollution coming out of them, and they would almost, well, some of them would rather keep the coal going and not have the natural gas, and then just wait for the technology for renewables to catch up rather than have this bridge fuel. And so, yeah, we could continue to have that coal burning, which is bad, but there are controls on those plants now that the carbon emissions have gone down. So I can't say that there's a great answer for that. It's, do you like methane or do you like carbon dioxide? Pick your poison.
Mm.
Okay, first of all, from myself, I just wanted to thank you for an awesome talk. But we also have somebody from the Zoom audience.
Okay.
So Diana asks, what protection can the Triangle Land Conservancy, a major landowner, provide?
Ah, very good question. Well, I think if you have a land conservancy or you put your property in conservancy, that is a way to keep it from being deforested, hopefully. I mean, you could, let's say you own a bunch of land, like my parents, that 19 acres. I'm encouraging them because I'm not going to go live in Mechanicsburg, Indiana again. When they pass, and if it goes to us, then, the kids, then we will put that in a conservancy. And that, and make sure that it can't be logged. Now, sometimes depending on the level of the conservancy, there are still logging that can go on. But I think getting, if I were rich, I would buy a bunch of forested land as defense. And I would just hoard it. I admit, I would just hoard beautiful tracts of forest so no one could build on them. So yeah, I think there is an incredibly key role for conservancies. Also in areas where there are wetlands, to conserve those areas as well, because I can't begin to tell you how important those are, especially in the era of climate change, in flood control and pollution control. So yes, TLC, all of them, Nature Conservancy, they all need to be, but they need money, One more.
Okay.
So I used to swim in the River. It's right in the back of my house. And I checked one time and the bacteria in the River was less than our lakes. And I'm wondering, how clean do you think the River is now?
Well, define clean. Would I drink raw water out of it? No. But I think the thing about, running water like streams is that, you do have a certain amount of aeration and then, it's flowing. Whereas Jordan Lake was built on an old tobacco farm and it gets those terrible algal blooms. So the reservoirs in particular are problematic because they're often built on soil that already has a lot of phosphorus in it, and it feeds those toxic algal blooms. And also reservoirs tend to, especially in the summer, they can get stagnant. So, I mean, running water to me is preferable to stagnant water. That said, don't drink directly out of the River. My dad, just a funny aside, my dad, when I was 10, we went to the Great Smoky Mountains for vacation. My dad never went on vacation. He hated it. He's a workaholic. And so we went, and he thought he was going to be like, mountain dude, I'm going to drink out of this stream. He had like his mountain hat on. Giardia. End of vacation over. It's terrible. So don't drink, please. Anyway.